leader is always treated with the greatest of respect in France.
Good afternoon. I am Lindle Hatton. I'm a professor at California State University, professor of strategy. I also consult in various public sector agencies. We've been here working in this environment for over 25 years. Happy to be a participant on this panel today. I would now like to turn to each of our panelists, have them to introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Deborah Hunt, and I too am with the College of Continuing Education as the Director of Evaluation and Assessment, and I've been engaged in the public sector in this role for about 20 years myself.
Good afternoon. My name is Tamar Lazarus. I'm with the Little Hoover Commission.
Good afternoon. My name is Grace Koch, and I'm Special Advisor at the Governor's Office of Emergency Services.
Thank you. Our session, Enhancing Organizational Performance Using Strategic Management Principles. We began by using a very vivid video for you. We felt that you needed a little energy, for one, and I trust for some of you that may be a familiar tune as you look at that team. I call them a team. Would you agree they are a team? I'm seeing some heads nod affirmatively. What gives you that impression they are a team? Okay, they all work together, they are synchronized. Any other evidence? What else did you see? Please. Okay, they wore uniforms. Another comment over here. I'm sorry? They had a leader, okay, and they were responsive to that leader. Any other observations? Did they have energy? Oh, absolutely. Don't you love the passion? I love the passion. We like to share that because, excuse me, we think it is a representation, a more holistic view, if you will, in an organization. For an organization to come together, to be established, building a visionary organization going forward, it takes more than just one person. It does take a leader. That's very, very important. So thank you for sharing that. But everyone needs to be committed to that organization as well as that leadership. So we hope to be able to share with you some ideas, strategies, best practices today as part of our overview. Each of our panelists will be sharing some ideas based upon their experiences. At the conclusion of our comments, which we are going to leave a lot of time for interaction with you, we would like to engage you in conversation and a Q&A. So with that said, please. Essentially, in any organization, we think it needs to start with some aspiration. Where do you want to go? How do you build a visionary organization? Often that starts with a key leader, someone that we can share that vision with, but we all need to be engaged with that, to accept it, embrace it for ourselves. Top leadership is very, very important, but it needs to permeate throughout the organization, not just only at that level, but others as well. That's why the high involvement approach. We feel it's very, very important to engage every staff at every level in order to have sustainability in any organization for that management principles and plan to move forward. Strategic foresight. You often get asked the question, obviously when you were young, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, organization, where do you want to be in the year 2020? If we were to ask you February 4, 2020, how would you describe that? What would be your vision? That is important. So everyone holds that as a North Star moving forward, that they would align with that process, be committed. Everything they do, all decisions are in line with that. So we want to be able to share some thoughts with you about measurement and effective tools. Next slide, please. Some of those tools revolve around what we call the strategic management model. We're going to share that with you. It's consistent with the state strategic planning guidelines. We will highlight that for you momentarily. But often decisions are not just based in a vacuum. You have to have some other bases. Data is important. That's why research and surveying, doing that element of assessing staff, key partners, stakeholders, all of that is very, very critical in building this very strong visionary organization. So data drives that. Our panel will be speaking a little bit about that. Finally, as you frame this organization, you put your plan together, measurement is important. Scorecards, dashboards, that's what we hear. Outcome-based performance is very critical in any public sector. It's not unique to California. It permeates throughout the continental United States. We have seen that. So we are not in a silo by ourselves as far as that goes, that we are dependent upon those metrics to drive us. Thank you. Having said that, the model, one of the tools that we find to be very effective here in California is what we call referred to as the strategic management model. Where are we now? Scanning. Where do we want to go? Formulating our strategy. How do we get there? That implies action, implementation, and finally, how do we measure our progress? Here's where metrics come in. Very, very important to know whether or not we are on track. We will be happy to speak about that as we proceed. So with that as a high-level overview, I'd like now to turn to each of our panelists and ask them to share their thoughts on this model as well as their experience. Starting first with Deb.
Thank you, Lindle. We all talk about data-driven decisions within an organization, but those data elements that we're referring to are typically shared only with a small subgroup within an organization, typically leadership, and are only discussed within the context of performance metrics. The last question Lindle had up on the slide. If you would. So while our performance metrics or measures are critical to the success of an organization or how we measure ourselves, these are all driven by factors that can be captured from the beginning, the very first question of where are we now, that scanning process. These fundamental questions require data to be collected, analyzed, and shared throughout the process. We have many opportunities to collect data, and this model really tries to leverage that. The sharing of the data is more than a two-dimensional process. It's more than numbers, graphs, and tables, but rather it's a three-dimensional opportunity to leverage the expertise of an organization, which ultimately drives the evolution of that organization. When data is collected, the expectation of the strategic management model is that outcomes will be shared within the organization. That means the entire organization. This often elicits a reflexive fear reaction, particularly leadership. Sometimes it's thought of as, well, wait a minute, that might include our dirty laundry. Well, sometimes it requires to bring to light organizational challenges, successes, and challenges. In fact, during our needs assessment process that Lindle and I engage in, at the initiation of a project, we meet with leadership, and we not only encourage leadership to ask questions, but be willing to listen to the outcomes and share those outcomes. Our experience has demonstrated that the sharing of the data provides a forum to ignite an organization's change process, even when the organization has had a challenging history. It really is a catalyst for change. Within the model that we're discussing today, we leverage data throughout the process to execute engagement, empowerment, and really use it as a driving force as that evolutionary process proceeds for the organization. Engagement is central and key to the strategic management process. Lindle referred to high engagement. It's ultimate. We engage all levels of staff within the organization to really lay the foundation for sustainable practices. While the model has preliminary engagement built in with leadership in crafting some of the strategic components, our first engagements with staff really serves to report back, give back to them the data that they were gracious enough to give to us, that internal staff scanning piece. Where are we now? We like to share that, give it back to them, and give them the opportunity to really think about the organization as a whole. They report their sense, their perceptions of where the organization is, but when they see it on an organizational or more global perspective, it really allows them to critically think about where are we now. And the emphasis is on where are we now. They can see that. That data helps prepare them to play a role in the future steps, in the strategy formalization, in the strategy implementation, and even ultimately in those performance metrics. How do we define those? How do we define ourselves with respect to performance metrics? The process of engagement really facilitates staff empowerment. The strategic management principles are designed to foster proactive thinking at all levels of the organization and empowerment of staff in the daily operations and decisions. Once they're equipped with the data, they too can begin to make those informed decisions in context of their daily activities. It is the engagement and empowerment pieces that are the building blocks of this model, which lead to the hopefully successful evolution of the organization. Performance metrics are, of course, how organizations will measure themselves, but the organization must first recognize that those performance measures ultimately begins with the people of the organization. The practices we're discussing today puts the people of the organization in the position to share in the visioning of their own future as an organization. That's the strategy formulation, and then define how they, each individual, can play a role in getting there, that strategy implementation, and then, of course, define how they will be measured as an organization, so defining those performance metrics.
Thank you. Tamar, you would like to speak about lessons learned from some of these practices?
Yes, thank you so much. So what I want to talk about today are lessons that I've learned over the years from a group called the Performance Management Council. And just in case you haven't heard of this group yet, it was formed back in 2008 out of an advisory meeting for the Little Hoover Commission's report on the state's information technology assets. And at the time, we talked throughout the study with leaders in state government, across the government, about how they can use all of the data that they collect to make better and more informed decisions. So not just about collecting data, but using that data in part of their management strategy. The participants at the time, they found those conversations so helpful where they were able to learn from each other and talk about their shared experiences and their shared challenges that they actually wanted to formalize. So we went ahead and did that. And for about the last 5 years, almost more than 5 years now, this council has been meeting regularly with voluntary leadership. Grace is one of its leaders. And also with participation from managers and leaders throughout the state department, agencies and departments, who are working on their own performance improvement efforts within their own organizations. So some of those folks are actually in the room here today. So as a participant and observer of this council, I think that the overall message is that improving government is difficult. Some even say that it can't be done, but what we're all here today to talk about, what you've heard throughout the day, is that it actually can be done. One of the lessons from the council, though, is that there's no right strategy or single way to start. Unfortunately, there's no handbook that says, one size fits all, this is how you're going to improve your organization, and here's the steps that you take. Every organization is unique, but every organization needs a champion. In other states, often the champions of these efforts often are the governor or the legislature, someone really from the top. In California, in many cases, our own champions have been within our departments at various levels. There are leaders and there are managers. And they start these performance improvement initiatives for many reasons, whether to save money or to guide their own internal priorities, or broader reasons like improving transparency, program outcomes, better communication, increasing accountability to the public or their other stakeholders, or engaging with their employees. Behind all of these reasons, there's a common strategy, and that's to use data to manage, using it to manage programs and organizations, using it to create a dialogue about goals and priorities, and then measuring to make sure that what they set out to do happens, or at least is moving in the right direction. A common challenge that this council talked about often was figuring out what to measure. Many of them talked about having too many measures or how many measures are right and will help us. There are questions about how do we tie measures to our organization's plan or strategic goals? Should our focus be inside on process metrics, or should we focus outside on broader policy issues? I think one of the lessons from the council is that regardless of what you decide to measure, the lesson is just to start wherever you are. Start using the data that's available. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can be good data. And as you go through, you can work on trying to find a better measure if you need to. The review process then should focus on the direction of the change, considering if something is improving, why or why not. That leads to another lesson. That's to iterate. One of the key takeaways is that mistakes are part of the process, and it takes time to get the measures right. So doing that involves talking to the employees about what works, what doesn't, why, and then addressing new ways to get there. Often, as Deb mentioned, fear is a common reaction, and I think it's across the department, from the top to the bottom. There's a fear of public scrutiny of the potential consequences from reporting information because it exposes departments and their staff in new ways that they might not otherwise be put out there. So there's a tendency for staff to ask, what's in it for me? They might not understand exactly how their piece of this fits into the broader change that the organization is trying to create. Managers also might fear introducing something, a new process that they're not familiar with. They might ask, what will happen if the data is misinterpreted and then something bad happens as a result? How will that affect me and my employees? And then leaders, too, could fear the ramifications of further opening up their organization, especially, when they have to go in front of the legislature at hearings or when they're in budget conversations. These are all legitimate concerns. There's a risk to it. But I think from the council, the takeaway is that there's also benefits when data goes public, and there's a real transformative power of making information available. So the council often talked about to overcome resistance, the departments need to build internal capacity. And so that involves training staff and involving them in the process. And this is staff at all levels, again, reflective of what Deb spoke about earlier. There's also a need to recognize that change takes time, and it requires a cultural shift that focuses on continuously improving. So not just you're doing this once, but going back and iterating. The ultimate benefit of sharing data is that it can be a tool for improving employee buy-in inside the organization, but also improving external trust. And one final thought I just want to leave you with today is that I think there's a growing expectation that this is how government organizations should operate, using these types of processes. The federal government is demanding performance metrics from states more often. Legislators ask more frequently at their oversight hearings about outcome metrics because they want those as a tool to help them provide their oversight and prioritize issues for our state. And the good news is I think that many in government are already starting to use performance metrics as a way to make data-informed decisions about the programs that they administer. So my final message, I guess, from the council is just to keep having the conversations about how to improve. I think many of you already are, and if you haven't yet, I'd like to encourage you to start.
Thank you. Grace, would you share your experience with this model?
Sure. How many of you have heard of the California Performance Management Council? A few of you. Excellent. Thank you. And I want to thank you in advance because much of what you have accomplished in your departments, I have been able to utilize quite successfully, and I thank you for that. It is a privilege to be here with you today, and many of you in this room are subject matter experts. And I'm just going to tell you a little story about my journey of the beginning of the marathon over the last 2 years, of how we were able to employ and utilize these resources to successfully adapt a very challenging situation. A little bit about, I'll just do one caveat. Large departments, for those of you that are in large departments, getting these processes to stick takes a lot more time, can take a lot more time and a lot more energy. Smaller departments have its own challenges, but for those of you in very large departments, I give you a lot of credit for continuing to pursue this path. The mission of the Office of Emergency Services, we're about 1,000 employees right now. Our mission is to protect lives and property, build capabilities, and support our communities for a resilient California. And we do this through extensive collaboration with all of you in this room, in your departments, local government, federal government, private nonprofits, tribal, to really prepare for, prevent, respond to, recover from, and mitigate the impacts of all threats and hazards. So 2 years ago, as we were beginning this process, I was brought back to the Office of Emergency Services. We had undergone a merger with a department, a large division that basically doubled our size. We were about 500, now we're about 1,000. We went through the reorg, GRP2, and a name change. And that, as you well know, any reorg creates a lot of challenges. So it was the perfect opportunity to take a proven set of a model and help us to guide our change management and to begin to unite our organization under a commonly understood vision, mission, values, and goals. So, you know, many of you know the processes. We're going to share resources with you about the model, but I want to share with you the outcomes that we realized by doing this. Through this process, we were able to engage all levels of the organization, which is, as you know, hugely important. We had the trifecta. We had the executive support from the very top. We had middle management engagement, and we included and engaged staff at all levels. Various times, various reasons, workshops, surveys, SWOT analysis, town halls, but we wanted everyone to know their voice mattered. We had our director had a consistent and persistent message about the priority that this process was, and that everyone needed to participate, and gave them the opportunity to do so. And we allowed managers and staff, when we came out with these brilliant executive vision, mission, values, and goals, we had focus groups where they came back to us with wording. Do I see myself in that mission? Can I support that? How does my role fit with that? And we actually used their voice to make changes and refine it so that we tried to maximize the buy-in and understanding. We had to equip our organization. So we brought in a subject matter expert. During mergers and reorgs, trust is huge, and it's not always immediately there. So we had to create a safe, neutral environment where we could bring these people together and allow them to share their concerns, to process through what was going on. And it was very successful, and also to have the credibility and the validation that we're not just making this up. These are proven and tried processes that we are employing, and we needed them to work. We provided specific training and workshops for our managers and facilitation. We can't just say, here's your model, here's your forms, go forth and do great work. Communication was one of the biggest stumbling blocks. We have to be able to be patient and allow our managers and staff to facilitate the best outcomes for those workshops, because we needed to own it. It was our plan and our process. We developed standard and consistent models and terminology. When you had 3 different entities coming together, hugely important. What's a vision? What's a mission? What's a metric? What are we, So we really tried to standardize and educate that, and that was huge. We tried to align our existing workload and evaluations. Many of you get evaluated on a quarterly basis and producing reports. We tried not to make more reports, but utilize the data that they had, as was said before, to maximize what we were trying to do, and not additional work, but the way that we work, bringing it into our culture. It helped us to overcome significant obstacles. As we said before, the threats and hazards are very prevalent in California, especially this last year. So we developed our SMART objectives, we had our process, we were doing really well, making progress. And then we had the prolonged response to the drought, which many of you are part of. We had the fires during the summer. We had the Napa earthquake. We had the storm damage. We had the Ebola threat that we coordinated with our public health partners, as well as now the avian flu. All of these things would derail us in the past because we do a full court press to address the immediate threats. And for many of our folks to be able to come back to a set of objectives and be able to measure how delayed we were and what didn't get done was as valuable as identifying what did get done. And when you take the time to measure, seeing what was accomplished during that time period was remarkable. But you have to measure it and track it to know where you're at. We were able to create safe forums on a quarterly basis for our programs to interact with our chief deputy to say, we're 70% on time, on track with our objectives. These didn't get started and we're delayed in these. It wasn't punitive. Our management, our executives, they get it. And it was used as a way to help allocate resources to reprioritize your workload to hit what was critically needed for our customers, our stakeholders, and the public. And to me, one of the most important things that it was a standard venue to create unity within an organization that really helped bridge some of those silos and reduce those gaps. That it showed that we valued our employees' voice and we're taking time to listen to them and develop pride in our department. We don't let what we can't do get in the way of what we can. And there's a great deal of pride that exists. And then that sense of camaraderie. If you have a problem that I can help, let me help you. It's not perfect. Are there late adopters? Absolutely. We may not all do the haka, but we're working towards that sense of team, but it's a great start. So I just wanted to share that to encourage you. Thank you.
Thank you. At your seat, you should find a document, a one-page reference for your use, various resources that will be available to you, articles, books, TED Talks, short videos, things that you might find useful in developing the leadership among your team. So we wanted you to have that. Also in the slides will be other links that you can access that will expand upon these resources. This is not an exhaustive list. What we wanted you to be able to see, you've heard from our panel members, it is transformative. It is a venue to create unity throughout the organization. Doing so, it will have sustainability. We have seen in multiple organizations where administration changes, that sustainability element survived. They provided that beyond the leadership. How many of you in the audience have participated in any type of change management or strategic planning initiative in the last 5 years? Show of hands, please. Wonderful. We recognize the institutional knowledge that's in the audience. We respect you with the experiences you've had. I'm sure you've had great successes. We are happy to share our experiences further with you. But at this point, I would like to open up questions from you. You get us started, we can go any number of ways. We love what we do. We think it's important to build a very strong, viable organization beyond its leadership. Your experiences, your questions from the audience. I was told that this is a very lively group, that the haka would not put you asleep. So I'm depending on that as such. So right here, it's in my eyes, I can't see, but I know this is, you're from DGS, as I recall, correct? Here on my left. You've had an experience at Department of General Services. That's one of the organizations, as I recall, that has great sustainability. Would you speak about that, please?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
I'm asking you to speak a little bit about the sustainability of a plan, a vision that was developed at Department of General Services that your organization did, I know, a few years back, but to my knowledge, it has continued to live, to survive for probably beyond 5-6 years. Most of the time, it's 3 to 5 years. The vision, mission, the experience.
We went through a process with a prior director where they set up basically a mission, vision, goals for Department of General Services, including our values. And that has continued to progress through subsequent directors, which have adopted that as well. It involved getting the message across through all levels of the organization. DGS is a 4,000 employee department. And it just continues to grow. We take nominations for our Value Teams Awards throughout the year. and that's presented every year. We've got great support from agency. Strategic planning has been involved in that. Our metrics for strategic planning and performance goals have also been included. We've put those on the website so our customers and client agencies can also see how we're doing on that. And it's been a very good process. It's been widely adopted by everyone in the department. And then throughout the change, the further change that occurred was we previously had a situation where our business services and a lot of our contract support services were decentralized. Each division, and DGS has a lot of divisions, as probably many of your departments do, each had their own contracting units, had their own processes, and part of the tightening of the belt due to the economic slowdown that the state faced, our director set up a program to consolidate that. We have a consolidated business services unit now that's doing those services for all the department. We still have issues with not everyone adopting that and not everyone joining the train, but through persistence and continuous improvement and feedback, that is continuing to grow in our department. And it met its metric of consolidating those services, providing a better work product, and really saving the department and the state of California a lot of money.
Beautiful, thank you. Sure. By the way, I did not plant him, I did not pay him. Beautiful experience, thank you for sharing that. He highlighted a couple of key things that I hope that resonated for you. Number one, the sustainability element beyond the first director that put this in place. It endured beyond that one, plus an interim, and now to the current director. The fact that it was drilled down, a high engagement with staff, they were a strong voice in that process that led the current director to embrace it, to keep it active. That is a tribute to staff. So thank you very much. Other experiences, who else have had experiences sharing in participating in organization management? Or do you have a question of our panel that you would like to ask? They spoke about transformative team. They spoke about unifying a team to be committed to a vision. Here we go, in the back, please. And please identify who you would like to direct a question to.
I think this will be directed towards the panel. And this is just a general question. For an organization that has not done strategic planning for many, many years, are there any specific pitfalls or cautions?
Very good. Would you like me to start or would you like to start? Go ahead.
You start.
Yes, there are pitfalls that you should be aware of, okay? Absolutely. Is it going to be perfect the first time through? No, it is not. You should be very tolerant. Your leadership should understand there will be risk. There will be many, I like to use what I call the canoe theory, okay? Anybody know about the canoe theory? Essentially, it's a matter of, you got to get the right people in the right seat, not on a bus, but in a canoe. So everyone needs to be engaged. That canoe does not advance unless everyone has a role to play there. So when you start, will you have everyone engaged? No. You may not have everyone at the executive level committed to this process. You should be prepared for that. But you can begin wherever you are in the organization. There are risks. Failures need to be tolerated. The plan will not be perfect. The process will not be perfect. However, there should be a realistic commitment of resources and time pledged to the process. Now I'll stop there and allow our panel to respond based upon their experience.
No, I think it's great. I think that it's a great question, and you have a lot of historical data in your department. And I thought that was hugely valuable to learn from DGS, all of the work that they've done. So talking to the people, why didn't it stick before, going through the offsites, identifying your purpose and who you are, very healthy for your organization. We've got a lot of, for those of you, we are going to post these documents online for the Performance Management Council so that you can easily access them. There is a lot of training materials, there's a lot of templates, there's a lot of resources out there for you. All of you in this room are resources to one another. DMV, CalPERS, CalSTRS, DGS, they would be happy to talk with you about the skill, I would be happy to talk with you about what we could do to help arm you with the beginning steps of that. But getting a model, doing your research on where you've been, getting high engagement and support, and then owning it. One of the things that both at DGS and my current department is we have people dedicated to this effort. Without it, it really can't be someone's part-time job. It has to be a focus to get it done right. And I've got a wonderful team of committed people who see the value. And that was happened both at DGS and here. So if that's your responsibility, there's a lot of subject matter experts in this room that can help you.
I think I'll just add on to that briefly. I think through the Performance Management Council, we've heard a lot from departments who get a little bit frustrated. Maybe they've gone through an extensive strategic planning process, only to a couple years later find that all of that work is sitting on a shelf somewhere. So I think to have that not happen, it's looking at it more of a long-term, ongoing sort of activity so that you're continuously looking out and forward to what you want your goals to be and then continuously measuring how you're getting there and maybe changing along the way. I think that one of the lessons from the council that we talked about a lot is that you don't have to have these one set goals that are always your goals, but those might change. So being open to starting, putting something down, and then going back to it. So I think a lot of what Grace said about having folks who are dedicated to doing this as part of their job as an ongoing process is helpful to ensuring that it doesn't sit on a shelf.
To leverage a couple of points there very quick. One thing, it does require an internal champion, someone that's committed to it. Number two, please don't expect that you can go away to a 2-day retreat, come back with a fully developed, full-fledged plan ready to go forward. It doesn't happen. So that often we encounter as well. So I firmly believe it is a process that takes time to generate the energy and commitment. 6 months, 9 months, maybe even a year.
Yeah, I mean, the first two words that popped into my mind were realistic expectations, and I think the whole panel here has highlighted what that means in terms of realistic expectations around commitment, realistic expectations around fear, and how can we manage or mitigate those fears, and how can we best adapt. There's a piece of adaptive management that is built into this process. Again, it's that data that's helping us drive this process throughout from the beginning to the end, you know, as I spoke to and as each of these members have. But realistic expectations and recognizing what are the keys of success as the panel has articulated.
Thank you for your questions. Other questions, observations, right here, please. Is the mic, back there. Okay?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jackie Cheney-Shelton, and I work for the California Department of Human Resources. We're a fairly new group because we are the merger between DPA and the State Personnel Board that was part of the Governor's Reorganization Plan number 1. I just wanted to share really quickly, we have a fairly new strategic plan, and we had the assistance of the Department of Consumer Affairs Solid group, who were excellent. They guided us through the process to do different focus groups and our executive team, and we really, really appreciated their assistance. Merging two departments physically was the first big goal, but then bringing them together, both the cultures, has been a major change shift. Then pulling them all together and saying, okay, we need goals, we need strategies, and we want to know your performance. And just a week ago, my staff helped to put together the report that came out from our department for the first 6 months, which was a very, very big learning process. It was an amazing experience to go through to come up with it. But I'd like to ask the panel about, we're in such a flux of change. There's been so many things that have happened over the last year and a half. Do you have any advice on transitioning that smoothly? I mean, we're communicating a lot and trying to keep the word out and the enthusiasm up, and I liked what you said about realistic expectations.
Thank you. So your question you are addressing, are there any things that should be expecting during a transition with the cultures, the changes, correct? How to merge those? Anyone care to respond on that, please?
Sure, and I think you're doing everything right. And what I've heard a lot today is about sustainability and not growing weary and fighting the good fight and Many major change initiatives take many years to truly get to the level of a cultural change. And you just have to, stay strong and encourage yourself, equip yourself. That's why it's good to take time to do quarterly retreats, put a little laughter into it. Some of these TED Talks are brilliant and funny. Just to take time to celebrate the successes that you've had. We recently listed a whole list, just a list of things that we accomplished despite some of these distractors. And once you look at it, you realize that you are making progress. You may not be able to get the grand slam right out of the gate, but you will see progress over time, and people will come on board. Those that are late adopters are struggling. They're going to have some choices. Try to help them. Be compassionate, but make sure that you yourself stay strong, because it is a marathon.
Thank you, Grace. You've identified a key problem or issue that arises, merging those. So be respectful of the different cultures, but at the same time, developing a commitment to the new culture. Go ahead, you had a follow-on.
No, I just wanted to thank you for all your kind comments. I just wanted to tell you, you're my new best friend. So thank you.
Thank you.
Grace is a great role model, so she has great experience.
Actually, all of you are great role models. I couldn't do what I do without all that you have shared and continue to share. And we really, together, this session, what we're hearing out of Secretary Batcher, very encouraging. It's just going to take some time.
Absolutely. We had another question. Was it here to, please?
Through the state, and just in your opinion, how close do you think the state is to starting to look at societal problems and with performance and following after smaller states that have been able to address those in a cross-departmental way? Do you have any opinions about that, or have you discussed that?
Are you talking about the models like in Baltimore and in Maryland, where they have
more like the state of Washington or Virginia, or those states that are addressing problems throughout the state, such as infant mortality or transportation issues, and pulling data from all departments to look at it across the state.
Right. So kind of having global,
have a centralized approach to performance.
I think we've had a great presentation from some of those states, and I think in some cases those models work very well when you have those smaller subsets, and we heard the same things from them. You have to start, the data may not be perfect, but you have to have like that champion. So I think we're getting there as the departments, as we get our departmental perspectives and our conversations about strategic planning and performance measures, what they are and what they aren't, as we become more sophisticated in the use of data, and we've seen great examples of that today, that I think it makes sense in many areas, and I think that as we progress, there's no reason why we couldn't do that where it makes sense and where we can begin that. When he says, where do you expect in 5 years, I would hope to see maybe the beginnings of some of that.
Good question, thank you. Other questions, observations, please? Are we there? We thank you for your time today, your willingness to come to sit in the presentation. Yes?
I just wanted to say that if you Google, it's hosted by the State Library. If you Google California Best Practices Wiki, the URL is kind of hard to write here, but if you just Google that, you will go to the Best Practices Wiki that they host with HR, IT, all the different tabs. There's a Performance Measures tab, and then you can go right to the Performance Management Council. We have stored all of your presentations, our notes, our white paper, research that we've done, and we will post these documents there so that you can have the live links.
Those links are identified on the screen. They are in the slides. We will make those available to you. We thank you. I appreciate the panel today, their participation to overview for you the model, as well as sharing personal experiences in their own organization like you did today as well. Thank you for your time. Hope that you have an enjoyable remaining afternoon to prepare for the awards. Thank you.